Hello, everyone. This is our first official online lecture for Advanced Curriculum and Development. Today, we are going to be talking about developmentally appropriate practice, the definitions and the implications of such an approach to early childhood education. So before I get started, I want everyone to keep in mind that in early childhood education, oftentimes we get far too hung up on the word curriculum and trying to meet objectives and goals. And in the process, we sometimes leave out who the true focus is, and that's children. So as we go along and we hear this word curriculum, know that we are not trying to take any focus away from the child. So this is super important, and it's something that needs to govern our practice moving forward. So, developmentally appropriate practice. NAEYC gives the definition of developmentally appropriate practice as children's learning that is facilitated when teaching practices, curricula, and learning environments build on children's strengths and are developmentally, culturally, and linguistically appropriate for each child. Basically, DAP, or developmentally appropriate practice, is a way of teaching that meets young children where they are. For a few quick definitions, I will read over them fairly quickly because I want to get into more concrete examples later in this lecture, but these are available to you on Canvas. Developmentally appropriate practice is an approach to teaching grounded in the research on how young children develop and learn and in what is known about effective early childhood education. The DAP framework is grounded both in the research on child development and learning and in knowledge about educational effectiveness and promotes young children's optimal learning and development. Developmentally appropriate practices involves teachers meeting young children where they are, both as individuals and as a part of a group, and helping each child meet challenging and achievable learning goals. And DAP is a framework that is designed to promote young children's optimal learning and development. Here are three core considerations of developmentally appropriate practice. The first one is knowing about child development and learning. So this is basically an understanding of research and what typical development and learning, both physical and maturational, is at different ages. Best practices are based on knowledge, not assumptions of how children learn and develop. This one's very important. If you have not yet had the opportunity to take Childhood Growth and Development, ECE 124, I highly encourage you to do so as you embark on this adventure into becoming a teacher. Number two, knowing what is individually important. This is where's the child at developmentally, not just what numerical age they are. This is focusing on the individual child and their own personal development. And this comes through true, authentic, and careful observation and relationships. And number three, knowing what is culturally important. We must make an effort to get to know the children's families and learn about their values, expectations, and all the factors that can shape their lives at home and in their communities. As I mentioned on the first night of class, we cannot remove a child from the context in which they are being raised or living. It has a profound impact on their learning, and it is imperative, it is crucial, it is critical and important in our work with children to understand that. Basic principles of development. This is a long list of bullet points or a synopsis of everything I just said, but I would like you, and actually it's mandatory that you read this in order to successfully complete the upcoming assignments and future work in this course. 10 effective DAP strategies. I'm going to read them, but then I'm going to give you some concrete examples so we can hear what these sound like. Acknowledge what children do or say. Let children know that we have noticed by giving positive attention, sometimes through comments, sometimes through just sitting nearby and observing. So this can be pretty simple. You could say to a child, I noticed you tucked in your chair when you got it from the table. That was helpful. Or I noticed you digging that big hole in the sand. That must have been a lot of work. You could then, you could extend it and ask, how did you do that? What tools did you use? Did you have any help? Try to refrain from things like, what did you make? Or wow, that's so amazing. Because sometimes they didn't want to make anything, and sometimes digging developmentally is just done for the purpose of digging. So we don't always need to make a qualification or a values-based judgment on something they've created. We can just acknowledge. Encourage persistence and effort rather than just praising and evaluating what the child has done. An example might look like, oh, I saw you working so hard on that puzzle. as opposed to great job, wow, that puzzle's beautiful, or you did great. In art, you could say, I noticed you used a lot of bright colors in your rainbow. Tell me about them. As opposed to what we often do in teaching, we'll say, oh, wow, beautiful rainbow. That's the best rainbow I've ever seen. Let's see. Number 3, give specific feedback rather than general comments. You could say, oh man, the basketball didn't quite make it to the hoop. I wonder what would happen if you stood a bit closer to the hoop. Let's see, model attitudes, ways of approaching problems and behavior towards others, showing children rather than just telling them. So for modeling, we model all sorts of pro-social behavior for children. One thing that is very important for adults to do is to model apologies. I think this is critically important in my personal opinion. So you could say, oh, Jonathan, I accidentally stepped on your sandcastle. I am so sorry. Would you like me to help you rebuild it? Or what do you need me to do to make it better? Demonstrate, number 5, demonstrate. Demonstrate the correct way to do something. This usually involves a procedure that needs to be done in a certain way. We do a lot of this in teaching, right? So maybe some of us do cooking projects with children. And if you are in a good quality child care program, you should be cooking daily with children. You could say, oh, let me show you how to whisk these eggs so they get nice and fluffy. And then you would actually demonstrate how to use that whisk properly. Let's see, number 6, create or add challenge so that a task goes a bit beyond what the children can already do. We will talk in a few weeks about Vygotsky and zone of proximal development. But for a concrete example of this would be maybe the child has 4 M&Ms on the table and you could say, oh, you have 4 M&Ms, let's count them. If you ate one of them, how many would be left? Or you could add 2 more and then say, ooh, how many more do we have? Or how many do we have total? And then you could assist the child in counting those M&Ms. That would be scaffolding. Okay, let's see. Number 7, ask questions that provoke children's thinking. This is a big one, the what ifs, the I wonders. So I do this a lot with my own girls at home. Sometimes we'll be inside and we'll notice that during daylight hours it gets noticeably darker, and that's because the clouds have moved over the sun. So right in the middle of the meal, I might just say to the girls, oh my goodness, I noticed it got darker. Why do you think that is? Or I wonder what that is. They might, and then they'll give all the answers, or, whatever their thought process is, and then I might gently prod based on the answers. And I might say, oh, so you think the clouds moved in front of the sun. Well, what do you think moved the clouds? So I'm trying to extend the thinking and extend the critical thinking and the learning. Also, it's important to note that these are open-ended questions that allow for critical thinking, and they're also really safe. So we want children to understand that it is okay to guess or get something wrong, and that learning new information is a process. And this is what scientists do essentially, right? They make a hypothesis, they might get it wrong, and whatever they do, it leads them to a different answer. So allow children a free space to do this openly and safely, and always model for that for them. Like, I wonder, I think, or what if. Okay, give assistance. Give assistance such as a cue or a hint to help children work just on the edge of their current competence. This is also Vygotsky social cultural learning and zone of proximal development and scaffolding. So for giving assistance, something pretty concrete, like in preschools, we do rhyming with children, right? And we might say, okay, what are all the words that rhyme with at? So we have sat, fat, mat, and then if the children are struggling or the child is struggling, you might pat your head and say, what do we wear on our head to protect us from the sun? And that might prompt the child to say, oh, hat. So you're scaffolding the learning for them. You're also using what we call TPR, total physical response. So you're using physical movements and you're giving them visual cues. Let's see, give directions. Give directions for children's actions or behavior. Oh, excuse me, and I skipped one. I apologize. Provide information. Provide information, directly giving children facts, verbal labels, and other information. So an example of this can be, me and my daughters, we go hiking frequently in Mount Diablo, which is in Concord and Clayton. And there's these beautiful, beautiful manzanita trees, and they have really unique bark. and my girls love them. And so when we first came upon them, my daughters were admiring them and asking what it was. And I said, oh, that tree with the red bark is called a manzanita. It's native to Mount Diablo and it doesn't need much water to survive. So I'm giving verbal labels and very concrete facts. And then finally, give directions for children's actions or behaviors. So an example of this can be, you're setting up a block activity and you want the children to count, and you can say, touch each block only once as you count them. If you're talking about maybe modeling pro-social behaviors, you might say something like, oh, you accidentally knocked down Xavier's block structure. Let's see if he needs help rebuilding it. And then you would walk the child over and say, Xavier, do you need any help rebuilding it? So you're modeling and you're giving the children words to explain their experience. Okay, let's see. This is the end of my little PowerPoint. This is a wonderful infographic from NAEYC, giving you a little synopsis of the 10 effective DAP teaching strategies. This is in this lecture. It is on the PowerPoint, and also in Canvas, I have provided you a separate link of the PDF to this so you can print it out and keep it with you for reference. Just a little end note, my lectures will be about 15 minutes. When I teach in class, these are 3 hours long and they're divided up between discussions and group work. To keep your attention, I will try to keep these below 15 minutes, but just know for the sake of time and editing, I won't always go back to edit these. So sometimes you will hear my cats meowing in the background or my chickens or my daughters. So I apologize if I make a mistake, but I am not going to edit it out because that is real life. That is the real experience right now. Okay, and as always, we'll be discussing this on Wednesday evening at 7:00 p.m. where I'll be able to answer any questions you have. And as always, you are welcome to email me on Canvas or give me a phone call or a text.